Hello, hello, everyone. Welcome back. I'm your host, Rico, and this is the podcast known as Relatively Sound, the podcast that is falling slowly. If you haven't already noticed, I am by myself today. Tony is not going to be on this episode, mostly because he has a busy schedule coming up and he has not had a chance yet to listen to this album. So I figured it would be a nice time for me to just do my own little episode and moving forward with the podcast, as it's sometimes hard for Tony and I, our schedules to align. I might be doing more episodes in the future where I am reviewing an album, I am ranking an artist or band's discography, or just talking about some random music topic. Today, I am going to be reviewing the new Swell season album titled Forward, which came out last Friday. If you don't know, the Swell season is a folk rock duo consisting of singer-songwriter Glenn Hansard and singer-songwriter Marketa Irglova. I became aware of the Swell season after watching the 2007 movie Once. Fantastic film if you've never seen it. Couldn't recommend it more. It's kind of like a romance, musical, drama, comedy. It has a little bit of everything. If you love music, it's got amazing music in it. Although when I watched it younger, I don't think I appreciated it as much as I do now. But when I saw Eddie Vedder in Seattle for his ukulele album tour, Glenn Hansard was the opening act, and he blew me away. Went and figured out who he was. Okay, he's an Irish singer songwriter, lead vocalist of the band The Frames. Immediately went and got all their albums and fell in love with them. And then I went back and revisited Once, forgot how great of a movie it was. And then I kind of started discovering the Swell season because in the movie, Glenn Hansard plays one of the main characters. Marketa plays one of the main characters. And kind of like in the film, they ended up becoming a real band and releasing full albums. Of course, there was this Once soundtrack, which consisted of some of their most well-known songs like Falling Slowly and When Your Mind's Made Up. And then they released their first full album, self-titled, which also featured those two songs, some other songs from the movie like Lies. And then they released a follow-up album, Strict Joy, which I also really enjoyed. But then they kind of went on hiatus. Glenn eventually ended up releasing his first studio album, Rhythm and Repose, years later. And now he's released handfuls of studio albums. And Marketa also has released some solo albums by herself that I haven't really had a chance to get into fully yet. If I'm being honest, I just tend to prefer Glenn's sound that he has going a lot of the times, again, with the Frames and with his solo work. But fortunately, they have toured kind of off and on over the last decade. They've reunited to perform concerts in the anniversaries of Once, when they put it back in movie theaters in select cities. And then a couple years ago, they did like a full tour. And Lindsay and I were lucky enough to go see that tour. And they were doing a lot of new songs. So a lot of people kind of thought they're going to have a new project coming up along the way. And then last year, I believe they released a single, which didn't end up on the album, which was decent, but it kind of seemed like a warm up to what was going to come next. And then lo and behold, earlier this year, they announced that they are releasing their first studio album in 16 years titled Forward. And like I said earlier, it just came out last Friday. And I've had some time to listen to it now, and I've kind of gathered some thoughts. And I thought I'd do a short little video on what I thought about the album as a whole. I will say this. Do I think it's a good album? Yes. Do I think it ventures too far from their past 2/3 albums? Not really. I think the thing that makes this album not as much of a standout as their other albums is that the songwriting and the song styles just seem to be a bit more ballad heavy. Granted, they've always kind of been known for their slower songs, their ballads. I mean, Falling Slowly is their biggest song, and that is one of the best ballads of all time. But I've always thought they've had kind of variety in their music. Like they do have some more folky acoustic songs. They do have piano led songs, Marquetta being the piano player in the band. But they have, some upbeat kind of rock songs. Looking at the one soundtrack, you have Trying to Pull Myself Away. You have that funny, quirky Falling from the Sky. From the second album, Strict Joy, you have something like Feeling the Pull. And you also have just some more louder, upbeat, but maybe, more dramatic songs like The Rain from Strict Joy as well. And I feel like with this album, it's really ballad heavy. It's even more adult contemporary than I would say their first couple of albums. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that these two musicians have just grown a lot in the years since their last studio album. For one thing, they both have partners and they both have children. Glenn recently having his first kid, I think just a couple of years ago now. And that's very apparent from the very first song on the album, the song titled Factory Street Bells. That's a song where immediately he starts singing about his son. And I remember seeing the song live a couple of years ago on the tour where he tells a story of how, when he's on the road for his solo tours, having a kid now changes a lot of things. And he talked about that before introing the song. And it's a very sweet song. I would say it's not the best song album opener. I actually think this would make a better closing song than an opener, but it's still a really sweet song. I do really enjoy it. But then the album, I feel like for the next four songs, kind of gets stuck in this very ballad heavy category because opening song, even though it is kind of like a ballad, it's a little bit more upbeat, has some really pretty violins. I will say the whole album's produced great. I really enjoy the mix of all the instruments. The violins are pretty, the piano's gorgeous, vocals are mixed really well. There's really good dynamics in just the engineering. So I had no issues with that. But the next three songs have kind of similar feels. People We Used to Be kind of starts off what you're thinking is going to be a Marquetta led track, but then Glenn takes the second verse, which I really enjoy. I like that. Not every song is just, okay, this is the Glenn song, this is the Marquetta song. I like it when they're kind of more balanced. But there's nothing in the song that's super flashy or super showy, which not every song needs to be like that on an album. But I was just hoping for the second song to be just a tad bit more interesting. The other thing I've noticed throughout this album is the lyrics are a lot more, I would say, mature, not even mature, but they reflect where both musicians are in their lives. They have a lot of lyrics where they're singing about, well, for example, People We Used to Be. As the song sounds exactly what you would expect it to. Marquetta singing about how she misses the way that they used to be and wondering if there's something they can do to change it. She sings about friends becoming estranged, which, I do appreciate that because she could actually be singing about her and Glenn because there was a brief period of time between these recent tours and their last album where it's like, are they ever going to tour again? Are they ever going to make music again? So I appreciate that. The third song, Stuck in Reverse, again, lyrically, it's kind of about like a relationship song where these two people, they feel stuck and they just seem to be going backwards in time. They're not progressing forward with their relationship. Relatable, but nothing mind-blowing. Although I really do enjoy how the song starts off instantly with Glenn's vocals and the violins and the music. I do think it's out of the first three songs is maybe the most catchy song. All three songs, and including the next one too, though, all follow a kind of same structure where it starts off kind of ballad-like. You get a couple of verse chorus, and then the song builds and has more of an epic outro where everything's just kind of turned up to 11, which is good. I'm glad that these ballads have dynamics. They're all kind of the same flavor. which is some critiques I've had of some of Glenn's most recent studio albums. So it's not super surprising. I was just hoping maybe there'd be a tad bit more variety in this album. The Marquetta led track, I Leave Everything to You, is not my favorite because I think the beginning melody on the piano and the vocals sounds like a Christmas song. It kind of reminds me of something that should be off the Polar Express soundtrack. Kind of throws me for a loop every time I hear it, but it doesn't do a lot for me. I will say the next three songs to me is where the album really gets going and is by far my favorite three tracks on the album. A Little Sugar, the next track, it starts off kind of like a basic Glenn solo track. Unfortunately, some of his solo albums have this tendency to have these darker ballads that kind of start off quieter with, some minor chords, some lyrics that are maybe a little darker about a relationship or a person. And then when you get to like the middle, the song starts to build until the end where it's just, a lot of him doing his more powerful vocals, which I usually love, and the instrumentation becoming more grand and more dramatic. But they kind of become predictable a little bit over the years. I will say that with this song, because the album doesn't have a lot different styles of songs on the album up to this point, this was a fresh breath of air. I especially like the outro with what sounds like a fretless bass kind of going off. The drums, a lot of drum fills. Again, he's getting very passionate with his vocals, which are some of my favorite moments from Glenn. I wish he went a little bit further with it. You have verse, chorus, kind of normal. But then you get some different chords, and it almost sounds like it's maybe a key change. It's probably not, but that's kind of where my mind went to when I first heard it. And you get, I think, maybe Marquetta's most impressive vocals, at least that I've heard live or in a studio song. It's one of those vocals where she starts singing a note and it takes you by surprise right out of nowhere. She just goes really high, really powerful with it. And it's not just one note. The rest of the song, she just keeps going on and on. The payoff of the song is fantastic. The verse and chorus, I don't think are the most memorable parts on the album, but that outro is something special. Penultimate track, Great Weight, was a single that I didn't really listen to before the album dropped, which I kind of like because this was another surprise. This is kind of what I was hoping more from the album. Not that I wanted every song to sound like The Great Weight because it'd be a little much, but The Great Weight is to me an example of a different style of song that this band can pull off quite well. It actually kind of reminds me of like Tom Waits. And this is the song that I'd want Tony to hear the most from this album because I'm curious if he would agree with me, him being the Tom Waits fan. It has a darker, kind of dirtier sound. It's got trumpets and horns, kind of some whispery vocal melodies from Glenn and Marquetta. Has just kind of fun moments where there's like kind of background studio noise. Just a different sounding progression than the rest of the album. It has some interesting lyrics. This one also seems like to be maybe the most political. He's singing a lot about like the wind and the weather and the sky, but he also sings about laws. He sings about empires falling and thrones and like tyrants. So this one seems like it's probably inspired by our recent political climate, which I appreciate. And it's nice to have one song on the album that isn't just kind of about relationships or about growing up. And then the last song, 100 Words. I don't want to say it's my least favorite, but it's maybe the most forgettable moment on the album for me. I think my favorite moment of the song comes lyrically, where Marquetta is maybe getting a little meta, where she sings the line, I want you to know I'm still here. I've just been keeping low profile, grateful for my time in the limelight. I literally think that could be her saying that. Yeah, there was times after the Swell season where in between her solo albums where she's been kind of more quiet, and that's because she was building her life and having kids and getting married. And that part I appreciate. The rest of the song just doesn't move the needle for me much. So I know for a lot of this review, it sounds like I've kind of been a little harsh on the album, but that's only because I put both of these musicians in high standards and high regards. I mean, like I said, I've seen Glenn live more than everyone else that I've listened to. And I do think he's an amazing live musician. I just sometimes like when he's a little bit more in that rock genre. And going into this album, I knew it was not going to be that because even at their most rock, the Swell season is not rock. They're a little bit more folk. And I do think the appeal of this band really is the harmonies between Marquetta and Glenn. The most thing that I'm grateful for with this album is that they've returned. They're writing more music together. They're touring again. Overall, I do think this is a good album. I don't think there's a bad song. There's nothing I think really drags the album down, maybe besides the pacing. Again, I would maybe make the opening song the closing track. And I do wish, it was a little bit more varied in the sound. It is a short album, only 8 songs, only like 36 minutes long. It's kind of hard to really have an album that goes a lot of places when you only have 8 tracks. But overall, I did enjoy it. I think if you like this band, if you like Glenn's music, you'll like this album. But right now, I think if I was to give this album a rating out of 10, which I might kind of do in the future when I do album reviews, I'd probably give this one a 7 or a 7.5 out of 10. Songs I would recommend would be those 3 in the middle, A Little Sugar, Pretty Stories, and Great Weight. But I'd also recommend Factory Street Bells as well. But I think that'll do it for this review. Drop us a comment and let us know what you think of this album. Did you enjoy it? Were you a little let down from it? Or have you never heard this band and this is the first time you're hearing of them? Let me know what you think of this album. I think I will maybe next week review the latest Counting Crows album. So I'll probably get that out in a couple, hopefully next week. I am going to start doing maybe some discography rankings because those are some of my favorite videos to watch online when people rank something, whether it's books, TV shows, movies, but especially music and albums. So I'm probably going to cover some artists where Tony's not the biggest fan of them or just doesn't listen to them a bunch. That way I can do them on my own. So Spoon, REM, Jason Isbell, and then maybe I'll have our friend Chris come on to help me do some rankings of bands that him and I both like. But yeah, let me know what you think of this album. Let me know what other subjects or albums you want me to cover in the future. And until next week, we hope you take care and you'll be hearing from one of us soon. Bye-bye.